Lloyd Schiller has been a member of Scientifically Speaking since January. He has entertained us with his previous 3 speeches and left us laughing. We will take a different tone in today's speech, how Psychology 101 helped me with my Coke problem. We'll find out. Please welcome Lloyd Schiller.
Thank you, Toastmaster Portia. And welcome, Toastmasters. And Portia is right. We are going to take a little different, or I'm going to take a little different tone than the first 3 talks that I had. Because after 40 years, I want to talk about how I beat my Coke problem. And it actually came as a result of taking Psychology 101 in college. So when I was a sophomore at the University of North Carolina, I took a course called Psychology 101. And one of the things that we studied, in fact, it was about the only thing that was memorable about the course, pretty much a waste of time and money. But one of the things that we studied was a group of chimpanzees going into a large caged enclosure, and there was a group or a bunch of bananas hanging from the top of that enclosure, and some wooden crates that were over to the side of that enclosure. Do y'all remember that study or remember seeing that in Psych 101? Okay. Well, this study was done not long after Charles Darwin introduced his book on the origin of species. And in his book, one of the theories that he put forth was that man was descended from the same common species as the great apes. Y'all remember that, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So not long after that, in the early 1900s, a German psychologist whose name is Wolfgang Kohler, or Dr. Wolfgang Kohler, in Germany, was performing these experiments with chimpanzees. By the way, Dr. Kohler eventually migrated from, or emigrated from Germany to Pennsylvania and taught at Swarthmore. One of the things that Dr. Kohler found were that the super smart chimpanzees and the smart chimpanzees could solve problems. And in fact, his smartest chimpanzee was very famous, and his name was Sultan. He also discovered that the average chimpanzees could not solve problems, and they would wait for solutions to be provided to them either by the super smart chimpanzees or by the professor. And he called those average chimpanzees socialists. Now, I graduated from the University of North Carolina in 1973, and I went to work for the Chrysler Corporation, which at that time was the 9th largest company in the whole world. And I was in their service and parts division. And in 5 years, I had 5 promotions, and I got to the executive levels of Chrysler Corporation, which you would think would be a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, when I got to the executive levels, I realized how weak and how poor their top leadership and management was, and I was very dejected. I thought I'd wasted my entire life because here I had spent my youth working for this company, and now I realized that it was being run by very poor leaders. So before I threw away 5 years of accomplishments, I decided I want to try the automobile business on the retail side. And I left Chrysler and became a service and parts director at a large Chrysler Plymouth dealership in Silver Spring, Maryland. Silver Spring, Maryland is a suburb of Washington, D.C. that's northeast of Washington. And before you think I took a giant step backwards, leaving an executive position from Chrysler to go work at a dealership, I made about 50% more as a service and parts director at a dealership than I did as an executive for Chrysler. Now, the dealership was comprised of 2 buildings. The front building that was on Georgia Avenue, which was an 8-lane thoroughfare, was where the new car department, the used car department, the finance and insurance department, and the accounting office was contained. Then there were 3 service drives here where people would pull in, would drive in, and they would have their cars written up for service. And also when the cars were done, they'd be pulled around for the customers. Then there was a very large building back here that housed the service department, the body shop, the parts department, and the customer lounge. And as the service and parts director, basically I ran this operation, and the owner ran new, used, finance and insurance, and this building. Okay? The owner that I worked for was also a relatively young man. He was in his mid-30s. And he was also a graduate of the University of North Carolina. He had a double major in mathematics and chemistry, so he was pretty smart. In fact, he was so smart, he dropped out of UNC med school after his second year in med school to sell cars. And again, you're thinking, how could somebody be so stupid to drop out of med school and go to sell cars? Well, today he has 22 dealerships in the Washington, D.C. area, and he's very successful, so he made the right decision for him, okay? Thank you. Now, he was very brilliant, he was very hardworking, but he had one major flaw. And his major flaw is this: he is terrible with people. His people skills were brutal with his employees who were average or just slightly above average. The people who were stars, he was great with. The people who were average, he was brutal. And several times a day, he would come into the service and parts building and nuke one or two of my employees. So I would spend, and this is every single day, every single day, I would spend 2 to 4 hours putting together one or two of my employees that he had nuked to get them to keep from quitting. So my problem, my bunch of bananas hanging from the top of the cage, was how do I keep him out of the service building? So I found myself feeling like Sultan, like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? And then it came to me. The reason he was coming from here to here was because he was a Cokeaholic. And the Coke machine was in the customer lounge. So 3 or 4 times a day, he would come from the showroom, cross the drive, into the service department to get himself a Coke, and he'd nuke 1 or 2 of my employees. So I got the phone number off the vending machine, I called the vending company, and I ordered up a new Coke machine, which guess what? I put right back here, just outside of the showroom building. So now 3 or 4 times a day, he'd come out the back of the building, go down the steps, get himself a Coke, and go back in. My employees thanked me profusely. And that's how Sultan, Psychology 101, helped me solve my Coke problem, and I thank you.